Dust moved around, making strange lights in the dark workshop as Betty slowly opened the squeaky door. It was Saturday morning and Betty felt a heavy feeling in her chest. She knew she had to clear out the workshop and sell everything inside to get some money. Her husband had left her with nothing, and she needed it badly. But then something happened that made Betty rethink everything she knew about her late husband. When Betty finally got into Will Bird's workshop, she noticed some strange things. Everything was dusty except for one clean spot by the workbench. It looked like something had been moved recently. Betty's son, Mike, helped her move the bench and they found a hidden trapdoor underneath it. It had been 2 weeks since Betty's husband passed away and she still missed him a lot. Everywhere in the house reminded her of him. She didn't know where to start cleaning, but she knew she had to. The workshop was the last place left to sort out. Her husband used to spend a lot of time in the workshop after retiring. He always said he was fixing old machines. Betty decided to start there, hoping it would bring her some closure. Having fully prepared herself mentally, Betty headed towards the workshop with boxes to help discard his stuff. On getting there, she saw that the place was locked up, and she absolutely had no idea where he had kept the key. She didn't even know what was in there. Disappointed to find a lock, she decided to give up on the shed. So she called the local locksmith to come help her with the door while she wondered why she had never thought of going inside there for 10 years. He was done in a matter of minutes and was off after Betty paid him for his service. Alone with the workshop, it was time to see what her husband had been up to all this while. Everything in the workshop looked exactly as it should in a workshop, although she thought that the place was more unorganized. But then Wilbur had never been one to care much about organization. As she moved further into the workshop, she couldn't help but notice that the place was dustier than it should have been. In a matter of hours, Mike came by. Betty sat him down and told him about her experience with the workshop. She led the curious son to the workshop and pointed at the workbench that she needed him to move. Mike excitedly moved the bench away from the spot to reveal something, an entrance to a trapdoor. Mother and son were surprised to see a trapdoor in the workshop. Mike opened the trapdoor, which wasn't locked, to reveal a staircase going down. With Mike leading the way and helping Betty find her way, they both made their way to the end of the stairs. Still curious, they took the stairs and up they went. Finally getting up, they were stunned to find themselves in the garage that had just one classy-looking car. Looking at them, he realized that there was a preloaded route program in it. The trip was a 30-minute drive, and right that second, mother and son knew the next thing to do. Betty got into the passenger seat while Mike used a small remote in the car to open up the garage door. As they drove out of the garage, Betty finally had an answer to one of her numerous questions. She knew where they were, but she didn't know where they were headed. The garage belonged to a house in the neighborhood that was up for sale. It had been on the market for a long time without any buyers. Betty had once considered buying it but couldn't find the listing, so she gave up. Now they were there. After driving for almost half an hour, Betty and Mike arrived at another old house near the city limits. It seemed similar to the previous one, also up for sale. Betty wondered if there was a connection between the two. It could be just a coincidence, though. The house looked run down from the outside, needing a lot of cleaning and repairs to make it look decent. Betty couldn't understand how anyone expected to sell such a badly maintained house for a good price. Mike explored the front of the house and tried ringing the bell and knocking on the door, but no one answered. He even tried opening a window, but that didn't work either. Suddenly, he got an idea to find out more about the strange property. Meanwhile, Betty decided to investigate the car in more detail. It didn't seem like there was much in the vehicle, but she had a hunch that maybe there were clues nearby. Everything in the car seemed ordinary. It was mostly clean, and there wasn't anything that caught Betty's eye. But when she opened the glove box, the only thing inside was a large black bag that took up the entire space. When Betty opened the bag, she almost screamed out loud. There were still neat packs of $100 bills inside. It had to be thousands of dollars. She moved the money aside and saw that there were almost multiple sets of keys and some plastic cards stuffed inside. But she could barely keep her hands from shaking. She saw that Mike was almost back to the car and called him over. At first, she'd been stunned by the money, but then she noticed the driver's licenses. They'd all had pictures of her late husband on them, but the names were all different. Betty and Mike couldn't believe what they were seeing. Why would anyone need 5 fake identities? Betty couldn't shake the terrible feeling that maybe she hadn't known her late husband at all. It seemed like such an enormous secret, but the discovery of the bag gave Mike another idea. After talking to the neighbors didn't work out. Mike took the various sets of keys from the black bag over the front door and started trying them on the knob. Finally, one of them worked and opened the door. He hesitated for a minute before deciding that he didn't want to call the cops until he knew what was going on. There had to be an answer inside. Even though Mike was nervous about what they might have seen, he helped Betty inside with him just to be safe. a locked door to make sure that no one could sneak up on them since they had no clue who might know about the money. It was possible that this was part of a bigger plot. The interior of the house was just as rundown as the outside. Only a small bit of light filtered through the boarded-up windows and curtains, and there wasn't any power to the house. Judging by the state of things, no one had been there for quite a while, but maybe that was the point. Mike turned on his phone's flashlight to guide them through the house while they looked for anything that could link the place to Wilbert. Betty didn't say anything but stayed close to Mike the whole time. He could tell she was nervous. They both were after everything they had been through so far, and it wasn't over yet. They looked carefully since the hatch and the workshop had been hidden, but there wasn't any sign of a secret part of the house or another room that wasn't obvious. Mike thought maybe it might have better luck upstairs. A house like that could have an attic to hide things away. Even though Betty didn't want to split up, she was exhausted. She let Mike go upstairs by himself since the thought of heading up so many stairs was daunting to her. She cleared off the spot on the couch and took a seat. The whole situation started weighing on her while she waited for Mike to return. She felt so stupid. Betty was upset just thinking about how much Wilbert must have lied to her. There was no way to confront him now or ask him what this was all about. She was angry that he didn't give her a single insight into his real life. Maybe she'd never get answers. Just as Betty was all ready to give up, Mike shouted down the stairs for her. He'd found something important, and she could tell from his tone that he was excited about it. She went upstairs as quickly as she could. Her heart was pounding at what it could be about. Betty could barely see upstairs, but she heard Mike in one of the adjoining areas that ended up being a bedroom. As soon as Betty walked in, Mike pointed to a painting on the wall. She went closer, trying to see it clearly. It was surprising to find such a well-kept painting in an abandoned house. There was no dust or damage on it. When Betty got near, she saw it was a portrait of their family. She was shocked and put her hand on her heart. Mike chuckled at her reaction. Betty wondered why the painting was there and if Wilbert meant for them to find it. Mike took down the painting and found a safe behind it with an envelope stuck to the outside. He opened it, and they read a letter from Wilbert explaining everything. It was like a movie plot. Wilbert had done some questionable work with criminals to support the family. He found places for them to hide from the police or do illegal business without getting caught. It had all started accidentally years ago. Betty remembered a conversation they had about an abandoned house like this. Wilbert wanted to buy a rental property, but Betty thought it was too risky. He bought one secretly. The house looked empty but was actually used by criminals during a crime wave. They paid Wilbert to use it. He kept it secret until the police stopped the criminals. There was a safe in the house. Wilbert left a letter explaining he hid money there to keep it from the government. The letter had a code to open the safe. Inside was a lot of money. Betty didn't know what to do, but decided to enjoy it as Wilbert wanted. There was also a painting she loved.